Welcome to the Breakout from Burnout podcast, the Triumph Over Burnout Mum series. And this is a special series or episode, I should say, because I have a very awesome guest. Her name is Pamela R. Haynes, and she is an author and podcaster. Now, if you're wondering who I am, my name is Aisha Mohammed, and I am a life coach, and I help women in business to balance their family life and their business. So burnout is something that we want to avoid, and I do that helping women progress without the burnout. So welcome. It's great to have you here. It's been a few weeks. Share this broadcast with all of those that you know will love and enjoy this conversation, free flowing, that we're going to be getting into. So welcome, Pam. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Oh, not a problem. It's an absolute pleasure. This is our second time together on a podcast. I have another podcast called COVID Conquerors that you can check out on streaming platforms. And this is where Pam and I first had a conversation about her first book, Loving the Brothers Here. And the point of that podcast was to give hope and inspiration to people who were finding it hard to cope and be joyful during the period of COVID, which we're still in, but it's a little less than what it was, let's say, back then when we was really in the thick of it around 2020.
That's right.
So, tell us about yourself and what it is you've been up to, and then we can talk about your burnout and your books.
Okay, well, thank you for the lovely introduction. That's really fantastic. It's good to be here, and it's good to see you as well. My name is Pamela Haynes. I live in London, in the United Kingdom, in East London, with my family. And I think the last time we spoke, we were in the thick of the pandemic, and your podcast came along at the right time in terms of interviewing COVID conquerors, people who are somehow managing to get through that time. And how I spent that time was mainly in lockdown with my family. So my husband wasn't at work, he was furloughed. and my son wasn't at school, so he was he wasn't really into the online classes. He never really got to grips with it. It's not his favorite way of learning. So we had those, he'd end up learning other things like how to clean a chicken, how to season it up, which he was mortified about. For some reason, he had never touched raw chicken in his life before, but he was learning. He ended up learning life skills. We did a lot of DIY in that time as well. So my husband built 2 offices. He laid flooring. Tackled the garden. So we tried our best to stay busy during that time. And after I had baked all the soda bread that I could bake, I wrote my second book, which is called Loving the Sisters, which no doubt we will touch on at some stage. So that's how I've spent most of my time. I managed to get a 2-book publishing deal in January this year. And hopefully my books will be published in July this year. So we're in a countdown at the moment. I think last night when I checked, 38 days to go to pre-order, and then 4 weeks after that we're hoping to launch. So I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I want to get my signed copy, pre-ordered and everything. I just cannot wait. I thoroughly enjoyed Loving the Brothers, and I'm just eagerly waiting to see what happens with Loving the Sisters. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you. So let's talk about burnout, okay? Started this podcast because in becoming a life coach and doing market research, what I found was that there was a lack of awareness of where burnout can potentially take you and why you need to act. So triumph over adversity is a thread throughout my work and life. It's something that I'm so attracted to, inspired by, and triumph over adversity. Through that experience, you often find yourself and find your purpose. And this is something that I found in working with clients and some of the women who I have been able to be blessed to interview. So it's a triumph to get from one point to another and to find out what it looked like in between. So this is what this podcast will be able to give you: inspiration, as well as seeing where burnout can take you, which is all the motivation you need to either prevent it, or if you're in it, to tackle it. So Pam, what's your story?
Oh my, it's difficult to know, where to start. But to say from the outset that burnout doesn't happen overnight. It could be loads of events that leads up to you, and then you go through it. It's when you look back that you realize, actually, I'm suffering from burnout. I'm suffering from exhaustion. So I'm hoping that I don't have to refer to the company that I was working for by name, but to say it was a government organization, and we went through masses of change. So in short, the organization was split into two, private sector and public sector. And you just get this sinking feeling from the beginning that this isn't going to be a good idea. This isn't going to work. So I joined the private sector organization, and we carried all of the vacancies. We carried all of the staff that were off sick, long-term sick, and safe to say, it felt doomed from the beginning. I was given one of the biggest catchment areas in London, which meant that my role was split between being in Hackney and then as far as being in Barnet. I was part of a women's cohort that offered services to other women. So quite a big remit. And I would say that it started from there. I still remember my first day going into Hackney office, and there was a fight on the train between two passengers. And that sinking feeling that, you can't do anything between Stratford and Hackney Wick except for keep yourself safe until you actually got off the train. And everything about it felt stressful. The IT wasn't in place to enable people to work at the office. The cases were stacked high. I was in an unfamiliar building. There was no lift, so no regard of the disabilities that I had, which meant I had to climb up several floors to get to my office. And when I got there, the technology wasn't working properly. I do remember being picked up a few months later, and my shoulders were like this, hunched up. I could barely get in the car, and I couldn't put the seatbelt on. So stress started to show up in my physical health. So more or less from the beginning, eventually I was diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands. I ended up wearing splints on both hands as well. Because, as I said, for me, stress shows up in my physical body, first. As time went on, and I'm trying to get to all of these offices, and obviously you're managing teams that are also stressed out. Nobody comes to the job neutral. Everyone has their own baggage that they're carrying. So whether they're sick or they have family members who are sick. But I found one-to-one meetings then became really stressful because I was taking on issues on behalf of my team. And it didn't matter how many times I fed up these concerns to senior management or higher management. The help wasn't really forthcoming. I think we got to a stage where there was nobody around to cover office duty. And I said to my manager, I'm not doing this. If you think on Monday morning that I'm going to be rushing downstairs and trying to put out fires, being the only person there, I said, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I think I also found when I came home from work, difficult to relax, always preoccupied with what I needed to do the following day, taking work home with me as a way of just trying to cope and keep on top of the work. That was a really stressful period as well. You get asked, oh, how was your day at work? And then you find at 11 o'clock at night, you're still talking about your really bad day at work. And there was no mechanisms in place of where I was able to switch off properly. I do believe that if you don't stop and have regular breaks, then your body will stop you. And
Definitely.
that's what happened. That's what happened to me. So in short, I was spending man hours on the laptop without a break. And it started to affect my vision. And I think I've officially lost count between that period of time and now of how many surgeries I've had on both of my eyes to to help myself to be able to see properly again. So I don't have 20/20 vision. Every now and then I get bleeds in the back of the eye. And they were increasing when I was at work. I do remember one particular stressful day and coming home from head office. And by the time I got home, I couldn't see out of my left eye. So for me, as I said, stress impacts on my physical health. My diabetes was spiking. I was having hypers and hypos. Sometimes at work, I was falling. Slipping on the pavement or falling up the stairs. I don't think I ever fall down the stairs at work, but I was constantly on the go all the time. So in 2018, I decided that was it. I've had enough after 30 years of working, that it was time for me to go. I was convinced that if I carried on working there, I would go blind and there would be no recovery, for me.
Wow. So what was your mindset when you was trying to manage all of those different dynamics and going through the stress? Did you feel like you just had to push through?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I felt that, I mean, I knew I wasn't the only manager in that situation. You know, there were managers across London who were, falling like flies. You know, there were staff members who were having heart attacks and, some really serious health concerns. I just felt the need that I had to prove myself and prove to these people that I could manage, because on the surface, a lot of managers appeared to be getting on with it and doing well and being promoted. And I was ambitious and I wanted to be a senior manager as well. And I just felt the need that I had to carry on regardless of what it was doing to me. So I very often would be one of the first people in the office, one of the last people to leave, taking work home. It wasn't it wasn't a new phenomenon for people to come into the office at the weekends, just to try our best to stay on top of the workload, which was absolutely relentless. As soon as you cleared your inbox, for example, or your in tray, work just piled back in, and uh, and that was the nature of the work. And people were trying their best to cope in a relentlessly stressful environment. It didn't help that much later I had some of the biggest remits that you can have as a middle manager. So you weren't just managing teams, you were managing health and safety, you were sitting on various committees. I chaired quite a few of those as well, team meetings, targets to meet, um, all of those things. Even thinking about it now, I can feel my heart racing a little bit when I'm reliving the experience and how bad it was. And when I speak to colleagues now and they start telling me about work, it's like I don't really want to, I'm just glad that I came out when I came out. And I have been in recovery mode ever since 2018 until now. When I first retired, I think I slept straight for something like 20 hours. I was absolutely exhausted. And that wasn't just from what I've been through, that's been my whole career, because I started working when I was 19 years old. And the only time I had a break was when I was on maternity leave. So that's a long time, to go through that. And I spent the first few months just sleeping and resting and giving myself a chance to recover.
Wow. So you explained so well the dynamics of, having extraordinary workload to have to deal with, and the other dynamics of actually the people aspects, and dealing with staff and the issues that they come with. And you said you were ambitious. So when it comes to being ambitious, you're seeing all these other managers that look like they were doing very well. Were there any other, dynamics that fed into you feeling that you had to prove yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when you're a Black person in the workplace and you feed into this narrative that you have to work twice as hard to get where you need to get to, then you do it. You get on because you're told, from very young that your hurdle, your walk is going to be different to those of your counterparts. And that means you have to work twice as hard at school. You have to work twice as hard as at college. I was a mature student when I went to university. And I was always, trying hard. I didn't fail anything at university. I passed every single exam. I passed every single assignment that I had. My dissertation, I'm organized. My dissertation, I planned what I was going to write about a year in advance, which is about drug trafficking, women who are used as mules. And every time I saw a newspaper article, I cut it out and I had a big box full of all the notes that I wanted to research and everything else. I've always been striving and I've always worked hard. So when you go back into the workplace and you apply for a middle manager's role, the very first time I applied, I got the job. And you think, well, okay, I'll be able to proceed. But I came across which is now called the glass cliff. So imagine they call it a glass ceiling,
Mhm.
but for Black women, it's called a glass cliff.
Mhm.
Organizations tend not to promote Black women unless the organizations are failing. And when they do, they give them the largest area. They give them the most difficult teams to manage without backing the manager and supporting them properly, and then stand back and watch them fail. And when they do fail, they say, look, see, this is why we don't promote your
Mhm.
kind, your people, because you fail. That's a phenomenon that I was well aware of that was happening within organizations. That try as much as you try, you were just facing this glass cliff that you could fall off at any time.
Mm. Yeah, it's not triple jeopardy in being a Black woman. Quadruple
Yeah.
jeopardy, it would seem. And, that's probably why so many women decide to do things for themselves. You've become an author. Many of us are establishing our own businesses because we want to take control of our destiny using our gifts and our talents, because there are so many professional, talented women out there, Black women out there, that the money that they've been making these companies over the years, in working in certain positions, they can command that for themselves in deciding to become a business owner. And I'm happy that that shift is starting to happen in great numbers. And funnily enough, I think the pandemic pushed a lot of us to actually do that. So that's awesome. That's
But
awesome.
I mean, but just before the pandemic, for me, it was I needed to find a strategy for myself.
Right.
So, by that time, I was at Ilford office, and my journey home goes underneath the A406, the flyover.
Mhm.
And every time I got to that point of my journey, I used to force myself to stop thinking about work and
Mhm.
do a little switch and start thinking about what I needed to do when I got home. And
Mhm.
then I picked up cake baking.
Mhm.
I picked up a hobby that took me far away from my work.
Mhm.
It meant that I could get into my zone. I could connect with my mum at the time when she was Skype her in Barbados, and would go through recipes together and techniques
Mhm.
together. I took 3 courses at a local cake shop in cake decoration.
Mhm.
And you gather your little bits, you gather your little recipes, and you pick up techniques, but it was something that was all for me. It wasn't about making money, it wasn't about starting a business. It was just
Mhm.
a hobby that I could just engross myself in. And fortunately, I found 2 other friends who wanted to do the courses with me as well. So the
Mhm.
banter, the jokes that we used to make, and even when I had surgery and I couldn't finish one of the courses, the women waited for me to get better, finish the course I was on, and then I joined them on a more advanced course. But it was all about me and my well-being. I found that even rolling out the icing helped strengthen the carpal tunnel syndrome, and I was getting
Mhm.
better. And then obviously the pandemic came on a few years later.
Mhm.
But the strategy in terms of looking after myself started just before the pandemic.
Awesome. And that's a good point to highlight, because a lot of burnt out women, they don't actually have hobbies and such. Like, they're so engrossed in the work and it's taken over their lives to such a point that there is nothing else. There's like nothing else for them to focus on. And therefore it becomes compounded. So having a hobby really is good for you to just get into a different mode where you can just do something you enjoy and, get to know yourself, which is all a part of the journey of recovery. Wow.
I think you get to the point where you think, you know what, I'm not going to be promoted in this organization. It doesn't matter what I do. So, and in a few years' time, if I went back to the workplace, nobody would know who I am. So,
Mm,
what am I going to do here on out? I'm approaching my 50th birthday. How am I going to market? I wanted to market in some way. And it was either do a master's, go on a
mhm,
cruise, or write a book. And I didn't have the headspace at that time to do academic work. I mean, if somebody was to award me with an honorary degree, I would take
mhm,
it. But me
mhm,
actually having to sit down and physically, do an assignment, I've had them up to here after doing a diploma and a degree. I really didn't want to study again. So for me, it came down to writing a book. And what can I write about except for my experiences of, in the working in the criminal justice system? And
mhm,
that's why I decided to write Loving the Brothers. And it took me 2 years to write in between the 9 to 5 and everything else that I was doing. But that
mhm.
project in the beginning was all about me wanting to self actualize in my 50th year. And the book was written 8 weeks before my 50th birthday.
Awesome. Wow. You made up your mind. You made a decision about what you was going to do with your life. And this adulting thing, let's talk about that because in growing up, and I say this as a woman in her 40s, okay, I have really just come to so many realizations about how deliberate you have to be when it comes to your life and taking control of your life. When you're younger, you look at other women, you maybe see, their accomplishments, be drawn to them for whatever reason. Maybe it's their strength, the way they carry themselves, their lifestyle. But I don't know how many of us are telling the actual story about what had to go into it, the trials and the challenges and what you have to know. And I'm discovering a lot of the things that you have to know. We're not talking about religion and things like that. We're talking about the tools and the strategies that you have to have, things like boundaries, things like how to set proper goals, things like self-care. These things are very, very important. And if you don't know how to engage in those things at the right level, then you can just float about, in life, number one. And number two, find yourself getting burnt out because you're going to have certain behaviors. You're going to be a people pleaser, or you're going to be a workaholic, or you're going to be a perfectionist. And these types of behaviors, these personality types, they fuel burnout because you'll be the woman that really wants to say no when someone's trying to put more in your in tray. And you're saying, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then you're committing to do something with the children and the husband and the friend. And then you're growing resentful when you're exhausted, thinking, why have I extended myself so much? And I'm feeling so crappy. And a lot of the time, we don't really feel that it's reciprocated,
It's funny, isn't it? I discussed this with a girlfriend yesterday, and we were talking about when you make plans to go out, and then somebody rings you and they to cancel, and how quickly your bra comes off and you jump in the bed because it just suits your plans.
Right.
You weren't fully committed to it anyway. You would have gone, but that
Mhm.
person has given you an out by saying that they're unable to make it, and you're like, oh yeah, oh well, all right, okay, but it
Mhm.
automatically suits your plans. And
Mhm.
I'm finding it now easier to say no to things or know when my limit is. So for
Right.
example, Sunday I had a radio interview and I had a book launch in the afternoon.
Mhm.
Got to the radio interview on time, but it took hours to get back because of all of these football matches that were taking place on Sunday.
Mhm.
And there were problems with the Rotherhithe tunnel as well. So I
Mhm.
got back home at 4 o'clock. So it took us a few hours. And I have to say that I was due to go straight back out again to Wimbledon. And I just had to know what my limit was. My limit couldn't take me. I couldn't visualize myself doing another long journey to get to Wimbledon. So I just had to cancel. And I hope that the person was okay about that, even though it was late in the day. But I had to put me first. I can't always be putting other people first. I can't always be serving myself last. I can't always be putting myself last. So I'm learning definitely, at my big age, to actually say no. I don't want to do it. I know, no. And I don't even have to offer an explanation. But if you ask me to do something, a good friend has asked me to bake a cake. I mean, I would love to be able to do it. It's an honor to be asked. And the answer is no, because I don't know where I'm going to be pulling the energy from to be able to, to do this. And somebody else has asked me to put an event on for them because they saw the event that I did for my husband's birthday, but I've only got the energy to do it for him. I haven't got the energy to do it for you as well. The enthusiasm and everything else and the time, I just don't have it. So I'm learning to say no and mean no. And and not being persuaded otherwise, because I have to choose me first. For a change, I have to put myself first.
How does that feel for you?
I think it feels quite empowering. It's not I think somebody said yesterday, you can't invite a cockroach to a cockfight. And and by that, I don't have to be involved in everything. I don't have to be at the center of everything. I don't have to be putting out fires. I don't have to be reuniting the family members and being at the heart of everything. I don't have to be that person. My son always says, my eldest boy always says, "But Mum, does it have to be you? Does it have to be you?" No, it doesn't have to be me. And the world still keeps turning, and the sun rises and the sun sets, and it doesn't necessarily have to be me that's at the heart of everything. I can be on the peripherals and let other people, step up.
That's so good, because this is where leadership comes in. A lot of us watched the matriarchs in our family who did feel that they had to do everything and be everything to everybody and hold the family together. And there is a honor that comes with that. But it's like seeing an image you want to be, but not understanding what goes into it, or not understanding how you can actually achieve that. And many of our moms and our grandmothers, they would have suffered with hypertension, diabetes. What's the other one? Hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. These are the things that we tend to suffer with. And some other challenges that they maybe didn't discuss with us for us to know what was really happening with them. We just knew they were always there giving direction. You could always go to them.
The menopause.
Yeah. Right, yeah. It appeared that they had it together, but we didn't really know what went into it or what they sacrificed in order to be this person. But yet we want to emulate them. And I think it's really important what you just shared about, we can prime other people, to know how to handle certain things and be the go-to person. It's always good to duplicate yourself. That's one of the duties of being a matriarch, in being a mum, in a family construct, is actually pouring into others in a way whereby they can be more effective, more responsible. They know how to problem solve. It's important. It's really important. You don't have to be the one that solves everybody's problems and that's there 24 hours, your phone is open, to feel worthy. And I think as women, this is the trap that we fall into.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things at play as well. I'm also the eldest. I'm the eldest out of 5 siblings. I'm now a writer, and I do public speaking. So when things happen, people expect you to be the one to be giving the speeches, to
Right.
and so on, be writing eulogies, and and so on. So when my mother passed away, it just naturally fell to me to, I had my sisters help me as well. But when we had the bit after, the service, I was
Mhm.
naturally the person that was saying, okay, well, right now we're going to open the floor for speeches. If you want some, I was that person,
Mhm.
twice over. And but what I learned later on is that when my children's grandmother passed away, almost a year later,
Mhm.
my son stepped up and he said, Mum, when we got back to the hall, there was no organization. Nobody was quite sure what they should do next. And everybody was looking at each other. And I stepped up and I said to everyone, can you please take a seat? This is what
Mhm.
we're going to be doing next. And he said to me, Mum, I could only do that because I saw what you did 6 months ago. I was
Mhm.
watching you. And that means a
Mhm.
lot to me to know that they are now able to step up into their own leadership roles.
Right.
When the time comes. So
Mhm.
you're right. We can deputize. We
Yeah.
can raise up other leaders within the
Mhm.
within the family. Me teaching my youngster how to, chicken don't come and arrive on the plates all prepared. There's a
Mhm.
process that goes into it, and it doesn't have to be me that's preparing every single meal. You know,
Mhm.
they can come in and they've got recipes under their belt that they can do as well. So I'm realizing that I don't have to be at the heart of every single situation. There are other leaders in the family who have stepped up. During lockdown, we all took it in turns to facilitate the family quiz by Zoom.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
everybody got into it in terms of when it was their turn to prepare the questions and be the compare and organize the Zoom links and so on. It didn't always have
Mhm.
to be me.
That's so important. And I think, we have to kind of step back and have a look at what motherhood really is or can be. Um, as we're developing and learning new things, it's really good to share that with your children, regardless of age. So long as they have some kind of understanding, you can put it in a way that they can grasp so that they can be elevating. It's like giving somebody a head start, you know, at the race of life. I've learned this, which maybe I wasn't taught when I was your age, but I've learned it now. So I'm going to let you know about it so that you can move forward with this information, to put you at an advantage in this thing called life. So, yeah. Mm,
And yeah,
awesome.
my middle boy has just come back from Jamaica. He
Mhm.
went on holiday with his girlfriend. And when he sent me, we FaceTime each other, and
Mhm.
he said to me, Mom, I do what I always do when I go on holiday. When we went as children, I said as
Mhm.
soon as we got to the hotel, we packed our things away. And then we went and had a walk around to get our bearings. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what we used to do when we go to Barbados, when we've been to Egypt, Tunisia, and all over, is we pack
Mhm.
everything away. And it doesn't matter how late the hour is, we always have a look around, catch our bearings, know where we are, know where the fire exits are, know what
Mhm.
health and safety precautions are, know how safe the area is. We always go for a walk around, and it warms my heart to know that um, things that I have taught them, they are now able to duplicate as adults.
Awesome. Excellent. So tell us about your second book, Loving the Sisters.
Yes, Loving the Sisters was written during the pandemic at this very desk. Didn't need flash software, didn't need a £1,400 laptop or anything like that. It was written in one of my many notebooks.
Mhm.
And then I committed it to the laptop at another stage. It's part two of the trilogy. So you've already got Loving the Brothers. I know you've got your copy. Loving the Sisters. I finished writing that maybe about August 2020.
Mhm.
I finally found the perfect fit with a publisher, having tried for nearly 2 years to secure a publishing deal.
Mhm.
They want the whole thing. They want Loving the Brothers, Sisters, and Children. So I pulled down Loving the Brothers. What the copy you have is a first edition,
Mhm.
and I'm rewriting I've rewritten the second edition already.
Mhm.
Um, the saga continues. You will find out how the women galvanize and support each other. So,
Mhm.
Loving the Sisters is about love, support, and loyalty. And
Mhm.
you will then find out what happens to our three characters, our three protagonists, who are all beautiful Black women. One of them um, is in the works in the criminal justice system.
Mhm.
She has locks. Everybody wants to know how her relationship blossoms.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll take it from there, really. I don't really want to give away any spoilers at all. I want it to be a lovely surprise for you. And then I'm writing Loving the Children at the moment.
Mhm.
And that's really good because I'm writing three different characters. You're introduced to them. You see them in Loving the Brothers and Loving the Sisters, but they take center stage. And isn't it true? I suppose it mirrors real life that sometimes women step up in your life,
Mhm.
and these women step up in the lives of our three protagonists. So I'm writing Loving the Children at the moment, and I'm thoroughly enjoying creating the new characters. One of them, you're going to either, she's like Mama, you either love her or you hate her. And that's the way it is.
I just love the creativity, and on your social media as well. Sometimes you'll post that one of these characters are kind of interacting with you, preventing you from sleeping or whatever. And I just find it, just so awesome. It's to be in that creative energy is a healing in and of itself. Um, Bringing forth your talent, being able to share it with other people in written form, it will live forever. And also gaining feedback from people on the impact that it's had on them and their lives. It does touch on domestic violence as well, which is something that is the pandemic within the pandemic, especially under those
Absolutely.
circumstances where people had to be at home, sometimes with the perpetrator, which your worst nightmare, and it's definitely a subject that needs to continue to be spoken about and people be educated about, because one of the first things that comes up in the minds of people who hear about a woman who is undergoing domestic abuse is, why doesn't she leave? And there are many, many issues around why that may be the case. It's so multi-layered in regards to, the mental, the emotional, and the physical aspects of it. Many women return several times before they're able to leave. And when you dissect all of that to get an understanding, then you're in a better position to maybe assist someone who is in that situation. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and they were saying that education is key on this subject matter, even to be taught in schools in regards to what a positive relationship is and what that looks like. you know
Oh
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw numbers of reported domestic abuse cases because there are a lot of people who still don't report.
Mhm.
A woman would be beaten at least 35 times before she even calls the police.
Mhm.
We saw a rise in murders in domestic abuse cases as well. And
Mhm.
it's not a case of leaving, because by far the most riskiest time for a woman in a domestic abuse situation It's when she wants to escape. That's what they're
Yeah.
doing, escape. And
Mm.
the timing has to be right. Otherwise, she's putting herself and her children at risk. And there are a number of reasons why people don't leave, that women don't leave, or women don't escape. Because escape and go where? If you're already isolated, you don't speak to your family because you're not permitted to do so. Who do you contact? Where do you go? Not many people, women still don't have access to a mobile phone. And if they do, their calls are screened, their messages are read. They're not allowed on social media because perhaps the person doesn't like them having friends and contact with the outside world. What started off as being quite charming when a man picked you up from work, for example, has now turned into a constraint because you can't see friends after work. They're even jealous of your work colleagues and people that you may work with. I don't like you talking to men in the office. Your friends, are not encouraged to come to your home. You've moved out the area. In some cases, you've moved country. So I'm thinking of, Melanie Brown from the Spice Girls was in a domestic abuse situation. She wasn't even allowed to call her parents in when she was living in the States, in Los Angeles, I think. She wasn't allowed to call her family. So, and if that can happen to a woman like that who has resources and is able to walk out, well, she stayed for quite a while. She even married him, knowing what he was like. Such was the controlling behavior over her. So it's not as simple. There are women here who are still waiting for their husbands to support them in getting permanent leave to remain in the country. So who are you going to tell? If you tell the police, you also then put yourself at risk of being deported as well. So it's those kind of issues. What if English isn't your first language?
Yeah.
Who are you going to communicate with to let them know that this is what you're going through? And an idea for another book that I've got is called The Karate Club. And it's about women in East London who the only place they're allowed to go to on their own without their husbands is when they take their children to karate. And the karate club then becomes a safe haven for the women to actually be able to talk about what it is that they're going through and plan their escape. Yeah. So that's another idea that I had in terms of where I see my writing career going next. But there are, as you say, a myriad of reasons why people don't escape.
And you broke that down very well. And escape is probably the right language to use. Leaving does give the impression that you have freedom. Where in those scenarios that you painted so well, clearly you don't. And another thing that was outlined, which people really need to realize, is the fact that it can happen to any woman. It doesn't matter where you are in life, rich or poor or in between, it can happen. Doesn't matter how intelligent you are, it can happen.
Which is
So
why I've chosen three different women. Patty is 45, professional. Charmaine is 25, mother of twins. And Rose is in the church, pastor's wife, 5 children. He's not stopping until he has a boy, which all the congregation laughs about, but she feels trapped. She feels isolated and alone with nobody to talk to, because you don't tell people in the congregation that you're going through stuff. And unfortunately, it gets worse for her, in loving the sisters as well, because people are encouraging her to stay in a marriage where she is grossly unhappy. And her husband is jealous of her gifts, because every time she sings, people are transformed. Every time she preaches, people are, their lives are transformed and they give their hearts to God. And, he sees his congregation growing as a result of what his wife is doing. And he is very much jealous of, her gifts and her talents and how much everybody else loves her. So, when I'm researching these things and I talk to ministers, they tell me, Pam, write it down, write the book, because there are women in the congregation who are, suffering from the very things I'm talking about.
It's real in many different forms. And what also comes to mind when we talk about domestic abuse is physical violence. But as we know, it can take form in different shapes and forms, which is, there's financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, and there's psychological abuse. And they also can really leave you damaged and traumatized as well. I don't know if they're given as much credence as the physical, but it can be so difficult to recover from those types of domestic
And
abuse.
so difficult to prove. So
Right.
I think coercive control behavior is now a criminal offence. But to my knowledge, I do not know whether a successful conviction has been brought as a result, because how do you prove it? How do you prove a man using intimidation, for example, as a controlling tactic? But, when I do home visits, when I used to do home visits, I used to see it: smashed doors, smashing personal effects, displaying weapons. So, I'm very concerned if I see swords on the walls, losing a look. He looked at me in a particular way. We know the look from growing up as children. If your parents looked at you, as it meant fix up and behave yourself. But when an adult does that to another adult, not allowing them to be themselves, how do you evidence those kind of things that are happening? Gaslighting the woman to her friends and family, her employers, those kind of things as well. Well, she's always she always forgets to take her medication, or
But
she's not well.
On that point, it was in North London, actually. I used to work for a local authority as well, and we got sent for some domestic violence training, I think is the exact words they call it. And I will never forget the woman that delivered that training. She may have been a survivor, she didn't say, but she was so passionate. She really drove it home. And I remember her talking about gaslighting and giving the examples of, like, when friends ring, saying, well, she's not really been herself lately, and, she's been acting kind of strange and stuff, and just really making those who should be there for her kind of disperse away, leaving her isolated and breaking down her self-esteem and her trust in herself that she's in her right mind,
That's
by
right.
the games that can be played with gaslighting. And that will forever stick with me, because it was such an eye-opener, into the many different aspects of domestic abuse. It blew my mind, and I will just
I strongly suggest that if your viewers haven't seen the film Gaslight, it's on Amazon Prime at the moment. It's free to watch. Have a look at the watch the film, but see if you can see the red flags that get pointed out in the film, more or less from the beginning. I have got a notebook full. I use this notebook to write down all the issues that I saw in the film from the beginning. From the beginning, when the relationship was you would call, nice and romantic. She told him she needed to go away to think about his proposal. And he showed up at her, say she went to Brighton to get fresh air and just reflect. He showed up at the station. He got there before her. And everybody else will see this as a romantic gesture, that he just wanted to be with her. But it was controlling from the beginning. He knew her movements. He knew where she was going to be. He showed up, and he didn't give her the space that she had requested to think about his proposal. She met him too soon. They got sexual too soon. all those kind of things. You were able to pick apart the film and see, you know, faults on her side, but most definitely very calculating on his side. What was described as being, rushing to get married while they're
Mm.
away. Those kind of things. So it's a very good film to watch. And when he brought her home, um, how he made even the help. She had, a maid and a cook and all of that, and how he gaslit her to those that they had no respect for her.
Mm.
Um, so she was in a beautiful property, but it was like a prison. And then
Mm.
it stems from there. So I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but if you want an example of where the term gaslighting came from, it came from that film.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. It's amazing what one human being will want to inflict upon another. It just blow your mind. It will blow your mind. And speaking to women who are suffering from burnout as well, the whole relationship thing plays a large part in that as well. And in how I like to look at and tackle burnout, which was very much germane to the office and being an office type of phenomena, it can be the everyday things that we go through in life that just end up impacting us to the point whereby we enter into burnout. It becomes too much to manage, handle, don't know how to, can't receive the support that's required. And then what happens is burnout one day. And a lot of people end up not realizing that they've actually burnt out until after they've burnt out.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
For
Um,
whatever reason.
I used to have a lady that come home, a masseur that come home to give me a deep tissue massage, especially to my shoulder. And she would describe all the knots that she was managed to undo in my back.
Mm.
Um, Again, as I said, I was walking around with my shoulders hunched up. I was so stressed out all the time.
Mm.
I would then got into the habit of getting my nails done, and everybody thought that, oh, okay, that was just a way of, maintaining yourself and all of that. But my fingers would be like this at the beginning, and they had to spend time massaging my hands just to be able to give me a manicure. And as I said to you, stress for me shows in my body. It shows in insomnia. Not being able to sleep, and
Mm.
then waking up, you're not refreshed because you're so tired, and you're tired all the time. And when you're running between different jobs, you miss clues that actually your health is declining. And because you put it down to, well, it's because I'm tired. Your weight fluctuated. It's because I'm tired.
Mm.
You're getting poorly every time you eat something. You feel sick, and
Mm.
you put everything down to tiredness, and you miss chronic diseases like the diseases you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
High blood pressure, diabetes, and all of those are exacerbated. Is that the right word? When you're stressed
Mm.
out as
Yeah.
well, and you miss key symptoms. I
Mm.
really do believe that I was a diabetic at least 2 years before I was finally diagnosed. So I went
Mm.
24 months of feeling dreadful all the time. In fact, when the diagnosis came through, it was almost like a relief, like, oh gosh, yeah, I knew it was something. Yeah, I knew I'd
Mm.
been feeling this way for quite some time. Because when you know what you have, you can finally start dealing with it and separating the things out.
Exactly.
You don't lump
Mm.
it all together with just feeling stressed. And can you imagine that if you're going through all of that and burnout in different areas of your life, you still have to come home and function and cater to a partner who doesn't see or recognize everything that you're going through.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when you're in toxic relationships.
Mm.
So, and women still put food on the table. They still go through all the motions, and they're really broken inside. So this is a really good topic that that you're covering. So all credit to you for being able to raise these issues. We don't talk about them enough.
No, and it's just something I've fallen into, let's say, and been able to see the seriousness of it and the fact that it is actually a life-saving mission. And I think that can be seen just from what you've been through, what you said some of your colleagues went through, some of the other women that I've interviewed to see what they went through. This is our life that's being impacted by this thing called burnout due to life events, and not necessarily knowing or having the skill to be able to, or the awareness to know what to do. So the more we highlight things is the more you may be able to see yourself in this, those of you who are watching and listening, so that you can get the help that you need. And I'm here as a life coach to help you with that. And you can find us because we are on social media, aren't we? You can find myself on my website, bestyouinmotion.com, and I'm here on Facebook just under my name, Aisha Mohammed, and also this podcast page, the Breakout from Burnout podcast. I also have a group that you can join as well if you want to prevent yourself from burning out, and you are a mum and a business owner. And Pam, our viewers and listeners can find you on IG at
That's right. Loving the author.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. I have so much enjoyed this conversation. Honored to have you. I wish you all the best. I am seeing everything that's manifesting in your life. You're growing from strength to strength, and it's such a pleasure to witness. So I just wish you all the best. But before you leave us, what's one word of encouragement you would like to give to our viewing and listening audience?
I would like to encourage women who are in domestic abuse situations that there are people out there who want to help you. The National Domestic Abuse Helpline number is 0808 2000 247. Every woman's situation is different, and there are key professionals there who are able to assist you and support you. And to my colleagues and peers who are doing the 9 to 5 and managing their home lives and their personal lives and doing it all, I want to congratulate you, but also charge you with this responsibility of looking after yourself and being selfless, and putting yourself first. Because as they always say, if you're in a situation where the oxygen levels drop, you need to put your mask on first before you help other passengers. So I want to encourage women, just for a change, to put yourself in the driving seat. You haven't dashed your children and your husband out on the road. They're in the car with you, but you're the one that's controlling the driving. Paths without obstacles lead nowhere. So I just want to wish everybody all the best on their journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So join us again on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. for the Breakout from Burnout podcast. We'll be back with another phenomenal mom who will be telling us her burnout story. So until then, you make sure you take care.